We are in the last few days of the season of Advent. We are preparing our hearts and minds to receive the Lord. It is that moment which God promised very long back. In the first reading, God reminds and informs our hearts, ask for a sign. And since he is not prepared for the sign, he says, I will give you a sign. A virgin will conceive and give birth. And that is what we are preparing for. This Son of God, who, as part of God's plan, is here for our salvation. God always wants to reveal himself, his plans to us, and he gives us very many signs. And he has been doing that for centuries, beginning with Abraham, who was asked to leave his people, leave his country. Moses, he told that he did that with all the prophets. He tried to reveal his plans for the people of Israel. And we know that from Isaiah chapter 42, verse 6, and later on, Isaiah chapter 49, 6. He explains to them what is his purpose. He said, look, I have not called you, my servant, just to bring together, restore the tribes of Jacob. I've called you to be the light to the Gentiles. God constantly tries to reveal his plans. And these days, as part of our preparations, we have seen God revealing his plans to Zechariah, to Joseph, his plans to John the Baptist, and his plans to Mary. Today, we reflect on how, like Mary, we need to read the signs of God's plan. Mary was very attentive to the will of God. Well, be it from divine messages that she received. Well, Luke chapter 1, verse 26, 28, through angel Gabriel. Hail Mary, full of grace. Well, she was very attentive to God's will being communicated to her through people. Elizabeth, her kinswoman. How is that the mother of God has come to visit me? She was open to these signs, to the events of her life. Well, the shepherds, after the shepherds have visited her, after the visit of the Magi, she ponders on these events. Simeon, Anna, these are the events which help her to discern God's signs and his plans. So God constantly tries to reveal his plans. Well, are we open to God's plans that are being revealed to us through the events of our lives? Whether it is success, whether it is pain, whether it is anxiety, whether it is failure, whether it is loss. God constantly reveals to us through people, whether it's a family, whether it's friends and the others. God reveals his plans through divine messages. Messages I might receive at the sacraments. The word of God could be through teachings of the church. It could be through the life of prayer, or the voice of my own conscience where God tries to talk to me. God constantly wants to reveal himself to us. What helped Mary to be open and to be attentive to these signs of God's plans being revealed? What is that? Well, two important virtues. The first one is faith. Mary's faith. Now, Mary's faith is the cornerstone of her ability to read and to respond to God's signs of revealing his plans. Otherwise, how could a child, probably she was 12, 14, 16, when the angel Gabriel appeared to her, believe that she could conceive without a human relationship? Because never ever in the history of humankind has a child been born without human relationship or medical intervention. Mary at the age of 12, 14, probably 16 maximum, she's able to believe. Now that's because of her faith. Well, on the other hand, in the first reading we hear of King Ahaz. He was a young man with not much experience. He was facing political and military crisis. Israel was divided into two, northern kingdom, Ephraim, and Judah. He was the king of Judah. Now, the northern kingdom, Ephraim, was in an alliance with Syria to protect itself from Assyria. And they were putting pressure on this king Ahaz to join an alliance with them to defend themselves against Assyria. He's scared. He doesn't know how to respond. And at this point of time, God reaches out to him, says, do not fear. Ask for a sign. No matter what's the depth and height of it, ask for a sign. And he's not prepared to take the sign. He will ultimately have an alliance with Assyria. And gradually, he's going to pay the price for it. He's going to pay the price for it. He is not prepared to put his trust and faith in God. Whereas Mary, her life was filled with uncertainties. From the time she said yes, she could have been stoned to death. From the time she had to give the birth to the child, there was no place for her to deliver the child. She had to flee to Egypt. Well, raising Jesus up could have been a very difficult thing for her to understand fully what is his mission. And yet, in faith, she surrenders. And that's the virtue that helps Mary to open and be attentive to God's signs of his plans. But this faith has to be nurtured with a life of prayer. Our faith has to be nurtured. All of us are blessed with faith. But then we need to nurture this faith with a life of prayer. Mary frequently pondered whether after the visit of the shepherds, when Jesus is back with the family, when after he's being lost in the temple, he goes back and lives obedient to them, she ponders in her heart. How many of us spend time, nurture our faith through a life of prayer? How much time should we spend in prayer? Who decides on it? My father, my mother should decide on it. The elders, grandparents should decide on it. Who decides on how much time should I spend in prayer? As a priest, does my constitutions decide how much time I should spend in prayer? Or the timetable of my community decides? The superior decides? Well, keep this in mind. The time that I spend in prayer, how much time I need to spend, depends on the need of my soul. And unless I'm aware of it, I will not spend time. Therefore, we need to nurture our faith with a life of prayer. The second virtue that helped Mary to open herself to God's plan, his signs, is the virtue of humility. Mary knew well that her role in God's plan was not because of her merit alone. Yes, the angel told her, "Hail Mary, full of grace." She knows well. It is God's grace. Because of God's grace, she's got this call. And therefore, Mary is very humble. Go to the reading of the Magnificat, Luke chapter 1, verse 46 forward. Mary glorifies the Lord. She doesn't take glory in herself. She celebrates God's working in her. The Lord has done great things in me. She acknowledges God's mercy and power. And therefore she's able to say, "I am the handmaid of the Lord." Look at this word, handmaid. It means a slave. I am the slave, a servant of the Lord. And a slave does not have his own identity. The identity of the slave is in the master. And Mary, when she says, "I am the handmaid of the Lord," what she's saying is, my identity is in your will. It's in your plans. Whatever you decide for me, I am okay with it. Your will be done. A yes. Dear friends, God, to the signs, events, people, divine messages, try to reveal to Mary. He does the same thing to us. Can we comprehend? Are we able to grasp and discern God's plan for our lives? Let me explain to you what happens very often. A little story of two fishermen. One was a professional fisherman, one was an ordinary fisherman. And you know, as a professional fisherman, you look at the tides, you take whatever you require. You've got very sophisticated, fishing rods. You take a container, sometimes with ice cubes, because whole day you might be there fishing. The other one just walks to the waters and starts fishing. And this professional fisherman observes this man. He's been able to catch more fish than him. He feels a little envious. But then he observes something more interesting. And what is that? He observes that every time he catches a big fish, he measures it. And when the fish is very big, he throws it back into the waters. And every time he does that, when the fish is a little bigger, he measures it. And if it's too big, he throws it back into the water. At the end of the day, this professional fisherman inquires, asks him, says, "My man, you've been catching a lot of fish. Congrats to you. But I've observed something." "What is that?" he says. "I've observed that, you would measure the fish, it's too big, you'd throw back into the waters. Why were you doing that?" He says, "No, I like to know, why were you doing that?" He says, "Look, I was measuring it because my frying pan is very small back home. The frying pan is very small. Our intellect is too limited to understand God's plans for us. And therefore, a lot of things, a lot of events, a lot of people coming our way, divine messages coming our way are simply thrown out because I cannot comprehend God's plan for me. It's too limited. We depend too much on our intellect, our emotions, and the strength of our bodies to go about with our Christian life. And these are limited. Let us pray during this Holy Eucharist, like Mary, to increase our faith. Let's be prepared to nurture our faith with a life of prayer. Let's ask the Lord to give us that humility to be able to surrender and say, "Lord, your will be done." With the Mother of God and the intercession of Saint Francis Xavier, help us grow in God's image and likeness.